to this question of what is Korean or who is Korean, I wanted to emphasize that there are multi-level in defining what Korean is or who Korean is. And I think in reality, in real everyday life, it's not always easy to very clearly define who the Koreans are, who the Korean is, because it involves a different maybe realm of defining what Korean or any nation is. So maybe cultural aspect, that is shared values, norms, food, language, this less visible but which obviously exists. This level of identity is quite important, right? So Koreans share certain values which we will discuss today, such as Confucianism, shamanistic views, and so on. And also, I think in defining who or what is Korean, I think historical experience, that is, we as Koreans share certain history of maybe modern development or the history of economic development, or even goes back as far as Japanese colonialism, which even though we directly did not experience, but through the history textbook or through the conversation with our grandparents or whatever, we have certain shared historical experiences, which has become part of who is Korean or what is Korean. And in terms of like everyday life, maybe physical appearance itself does work in defining who is Korean. So, for example, the example of the CEO of a Korean tourism company, Mr. Lee Cham, like he's Korean. I mean, legally he's Korean, and he's very well liked by the current president Lee Myung-bak. Okay, and so legally there's no problem that he's a Korean, and he speaks quite good Korean language. But Koreans will kind of think very ambivalently. Yeah, well, he doesn't look like Korean, and he like present himself as Korean, and there's kind of interesting translation or interesting interpretation of who he is or what he is. So there's kind of physical appearance does play a role. So maybe in a very core group of Koreans, he might not be really integrated. It's kind of like very less obvious aspect of defining who and what is Korean. And also, there is this physical, biological aspect of like interpreting other person as part of ourselves, or in terms of excluding others and so on. And also, I guess, legal. Maybe we, in modern nation-state system, legal aspect, your passport is very important in defining your nationality. So as a sociologist, I would say this different aspect of defining the identity plays different roles in maybe different context and different cultural settings. And we have to be kind of like more careful in defining how this kind of definition, defining the nationality, is taking place in real life. There is no such thing as very simple, straightforward way of who Korean is, I think, especially in this very complex, maybe modern multicultural society. Okay, with this kind of footnote, that is, it's quite difficult to simplify or define what Korean is or what Korean culture is. I will try to provide very simplified or stereotypical definition of what Korean culture is. This is kind of very maybe textbook level definition. What is the general character of Korean culture? Number one, weism, we. Or in Korean it's called 우리주의. It's also very family-centered culture, family-centered value. So we, or Koreans do not really prefer or do not really feel comfortable saying I. We probably feel more comfortable, safer to say we, us, as a group. Okay, so for example, we wouldn't say my school is Korean University is my school. Well, in English, probably it's okay. Korean University is my school, right? But we would say 우리 학교, which means our school. We wouldn't say in Korean my family. We would say our family, 우리 가족, our family. We wouldn't we seldom say my wife. We say 우리 집사람, which means our wife at home. And it's like kind of very traditional, very polite way of saying it. That is like 우리 집사람. It's like direct translation of Korean would be our housewife or our wife at home, right? So it doesn't mean that we are polygamy. We have one man and one woman as a couple, but we try to locate this relationship of a spouse in the context of more extended family. So it's not like really one individual and another individual. They will be located in the whole family. So we say our family, our wife, and so on at home. And another example of this kind of emphasizing we, or weism, is soup. Well, not really. I don't know how to translate this. The Korean food called 찌개, 된장찌개. I don't know if you know. Do you know 된장찌개 in Fudan, at Fudan? 찌개. Do you know? Right. So 김치찌개, 된장찌개, right? This kind of, what would be good English translation for 찌개? Stew? Yeah, maybe stew, or yeah. It's like it's bowl of food with a lot of liquid, like right, boiled stew. But as for stew, probably in the West, if we're having stew for dinner, if you will be sharing them, but it will be served to each individual dish, right? Rather, but instead in Korea, if you're really family or if you're really friends and sharing 찌개 or stew, Korean stew, you wouldn't have individual dish. You'd actually sharing whole bowl of stew by like using your spoon. It's like maybe sanitarily it might not be very clean, but we don't really care. And I think it's like there's kind of complete trust, or maybe solidarity building by having a bowl of kimchi-jjigae together. Of course, nowadays, because of like maybe individualization and modernization, if you go to a restaurant and order kimchi-jjigae or 된장찌개, you would ask for individual bowl, and then you could put the jjigae into your own dish. But that would not be really a conventional or traditional way of eating jjigae. So, of course, at home, if I am having dinner with my family and dish of jjigae or stew, we would just like share the whole big bowl with a spoon. And even I think at work, at school, for example, in my case, If I were like eating dinner with close friends or close coworkers or close graduate students, we wouldn't really care if we share the bowl with individual spoons. It's like there is complete like familial culture in eating jjigae. But if you were like having more official, formal guest, of course you would have individual bowl for jjigae. So I think jjigae or stew, kind of Korean stew, is an example of this kind of collective culture. It's really sharing food, literally, and that's a very important part of building solidarity. Red devils. What is red devils? Red devils? Do you, hello, Hudan. Is anybody who familiar with the term red devils? Red devils, no? It's like it became quite famous during the 2002 World Cup. So it's like all these Korean people wearing red T-shirts and cheering Korea for Go Korea, 대한민국, 대한민국. I guess that was what everybody was so excited, and I think it was very memorable weeks of World Cup from very young children to the elderly on the street. And that was kind of collective identity building. I think it was an interesting case sociologically because for many, in any country, building national identity is very important, right? So that's why all countries have national anthem. They have flags. They have certain symbols to make people part of a nation. It was very important in Korea during the 1960s and 70s, but it was mostly from top down. The government wanted to make the people of Korea Koreans. So we had a very strict government trying to impose Koreans to become Korean from the early stages of their childhood. So it was kind of top-down nation-making process. Government required that we memorize certain text saying that I'm the member of Korean people, a Korean nation, I pay my loyalty to Korea, and so on. It was top-down nation-making process. Whereas I think this 2002 experience is kind of bottom-up process of building national identity. We, or as Koreans, we felt that we are part of Korea. Okay? And so in any country, I would say this is quite important in order to have a stable political order. But in this, I think we were, this Red Devil phenomenon in 2002 was quite phenomenal. Maybe tens of millions of Koreans were on the street wearing T-shirts and cheering for the Korean government, a Korean team. I think that kind of expresses that shows our emphasis on being a team, being we. And I think this rivalry game between Korean University and Yonsei University is actually could be a kind of example of this kind of emphasis on being we. And sociologically speaking, I think I know that some of you were there and couldn't come to the class, okay? And I said, well, it's okay, it's a very important cultural experience. And cheering for your team, your university team, make you feel like you are part of your group, your family or whatever, and you really, after this kind of experience, you become very integral part of your group, or we even call family of Korean University. And actually, Korean University is famous for, or Yonsei would say, notorious for their very solid identity, developing network even after they graduate, right? So we have, especially Korean University, have very strong emphasis on being we. Okay. So that's a kind of very simplified way of defining Korean culture, but I think it may be kind of useful first step in understanding Korean culture. Another important aspect of Korean culture is emphasis on hierarchy. Okay? Maybe many of you have recognized, especially those who were from other part of the world, you might find that age, your 학번, that is year of entrance to university, is very important. So we use very delicate, very elaborated honorifics. The terminology, the language itself kind of reflects this hierarchy. So you use 존댓말, honorifics to your senior, right? And also you would try, in order to have smooth relationship, you would want to know the age of another person in your the first contact. So you might feel, if he's like a couple years older, you would start to call 형 or 누나, a big brother, like big brother or big sister, 누나, right? 누나 is a term that you use, I guess, right? Do you call, if you have a couple years senior in your department, how do you call this female? 누나, okay. So 누나.
누나.
Okay. So who's 누나 here? So age is important, right? What is 누나 in Chinese?
姐姐.
See, that's 누나.
姐姐.
So what about in China? Is it similar? If you have a 2-year-old senior at your department, you'd call her 姐姐. Okay. Or if you were in high school, or no, not really. Okay. But like the terms like big brother or big sister are widely used, especially among the young generation when they're attending college. But the term itself is from the family, right? It's from the family, and even though you're not really, your relationship at school on campus is not really family relationship, you would use these terms based on family, and in using these terms, age is very important, right? And also maybe senior, like 선배, and you would use honorifics. Okay. Sometimes it could be quite complicated, though, right? Because as you get into more complicated setting, complicated cultural setting, it's not always that simple. Okay. For example, I had a senior during the college years, 1 year old in terms of 학번, in terms of entering college. I entered university in 1981, and he, my senior, entered the university in 1980. So he's my senior. So I used the term 형, big brother. What is 형 in Chinese?哥哥. Okay. Yeah. I must confess, I started learning Chinese. Yeah. So I'm learning this 4 intonations, right? Go. Okay. Anyway, I'm just beginner. Anyway, maybe at the end of this semester, I might be able to speak some Chinese to the students in China, in Fuda. Okay, hopefully, yeah. Anyway, so he was he was 1 year old, 1 year senior in terms of entering the university. Okay, so I called him Hyung, or Gogo, big brother. We spent 3 years on campus together. I went to the graduate school in the US, finished my PhD and came back. And I became the faculty member of this department in 1994. And I met him, this guy, Mr. P, let me just call it, Mr. P again. And he was still a graduate student. And the situation get very complicated because he was 1 year senior in terms of entering university. So I called him Gogo, Hyung. But I became professor, and he's a student. So it is like the students in Korean culture, the hierarchy of student and professor is quite very, very important as well. So it became quite complicated, and so we began to use, both of us began to use honorifics, right? And then I called him like 선배. It's like not anymore Gogo, but like 선배, who's a senior. Hi, Mr. Senior. And so mutually kind of respecting each other, trying not to get too close. It's kind of very delicate situation. And a couple years later, he received his PhD, and he applied for a job in this department. Okay, and I was able to look at his CV, and I realized that he was actually 1 year younger than I am. Because I did 재수, because I failed to enter university in 1980, so I tried again in 1981. And actually, he entered in 1980, but he entered elementary school at the age of 7, and whereas I entered at 8. So he was actually 1 year younger. I looked at his CV and like academic achievement and so on, and I went, wow, he was actually younger than I am. I kind of like, wow, this is kind of betrayal of. Anyway. So, and I began to realize, and also I trust that he probably knew that I knew his age. But still, it's like we couldn't really say that, well, now you're younger than I am, I should call you 동생, or you could call me Gogo, right? It's not like that. It's very complicated and delicate. And still, we meet once in a while, and it's like very unstabilized relationship, and we feel both uncomfortable. So we wouldn't really drink together. We would just maybe have lunch together or have tea, but we wouldn't really get into like really like intimate relation, because in terms of this like multiple hierarchical system, it's very, very complicated. We feel very uncomfortable because it's difficult to like define. This would never happen if I was in the US or in Australia, because we would use English, and like there's no really like this kind of hierarchical system mechanism working. So, but anyway, I mean, I think this kind of shows that this hierarchy is quite important. There are multiple levels of hierarchical mechanism, and which actually include sometimes age, sometimes year of entering college, and if you move into the job market, maybe there could be another different level, different hierarchical system. So it could get quite complicated. And I think, I know that it's unconstitutional, but some companies actually prefer not to have too aged, too old new employee. I don't think there's like real written age limit in terms of hiring the new employee. They used to say that like this year we will be hiring new employee, our company, and their age should be, they should be born in from like 1980 to 1983 or something like that. But I think they have sued the government, the companies, and it become like it was defined that it's unconstitutional to have age discrimination. So the companies wouldn't say that like explicitly, but I know that many companies have certain like internal rule that they would rather have similar cohort for a particular year of hiring new employee, because they know that if there was some people, some new employee too old, that that could be uncomfortable in the job place. So still, this hierarchical structure based on age is an important factor in organizing social relationship. Okay, so emphasis on hierarchy is quite a significant part of ourselves, our culture. This is often also quite often referred to as part of Korean culture. They say that there is some irrationality in Korean culture. Often it comes from the shamanism, inyeon, act of providence, or 복, good fortune. It's 팔자, it's like individual destiny. So this different terms are used. These terms are not very scientific. If you, for example, let's say that there was a couple who loved each other very much, and maybe the parents, parents of the bride, do not really like the bridegroom, and very strongly say that you shouldn't get married. You two shouldn't get married. Maybe some couple would insist and they would get married. But some couple will say, well, if the opposition by the parents is so strong, they would say, well, let's rethink about this relationship. And some couple might say, well, let's say goodbye. And they would say, well, this is not our inyeon, we are probably not really made for each other. It's very irrational. I mean, if they really loved each other, they should have go on, and then they should really challenge their parents. But they would say, well, parents are also important. Probably for this particular in this particular life, we are not really made to become a spouse, a couple. So they say, well, this is our inyeon. This is like our 팔자 or whatever. And let's say maybe in next life, let's meet again. It seems quite irrational because it's your choice, they would say. People would say, it's your choice whether you want to marry or not. And how could they kind of say that, well, this is something that we are not really made for each other, or we are not really destined to become a couple. But that kind of irrationality still takes place in Korean society. So maybe if I believe in this, I could say that we were predestined to meet in this class. Like maybe our encounter in this classroom, or our encounter with the students in China. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 students in China, and we are predestined to meet each other. Like it might not be a very rational explanation, but there must be something that had made us to meet through this e-learning program. And I mean, it's quite amazing, I guess. That is the probability of meeting in this kind of condition, right? You each individual have decided to take this class, and this class turned out to be a part of e-learning program. And then there are some students in China, hundreds of miles away. Student at Fudan decided to take this class. And so we met in this class. And it's like the probability of like meeting each other through this kind of program could be very low. Probability could be very low. And so maybe you can say that, well, this is amazing. This is something, some kind of like providence, or some kind of, we were maybe predestined to meet each other through this unknown God or law or whatever. Okay, so that's part. That kind of mentality, that kind of explanation for our fate is taking place in Korea still today. Where have they come from? All this kind of this wisdom, emphasis on hierarchy, or having this kind of irrationality in Korean society. I think a very important part of Korean culture comes from, if you were to choose, right, what would be very important part of Korean, for example, if we emphasize hierarchy, where have they come from? Where has it come from? Look at the history of Korean society. This value, this culture of emphasizing hierarchy between the senior and junior, teacher and students, or father and son. Can you name? Yeah? Yes, okay. So let the students in China hear what she says. Yeah. Bianca?
Confucianism or Neo-Confucianism.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Did you hear that? Hello? Yeah, okay, good. Okay. I think it's quite obvious. Confucianism. I guess that's very important part of Korean culture, or many Asian cultures. This so-called, for example, this 5 moral imperatives. 5 moral imperatives. All of you read these Chinese characters, right? 5 moral imperatives. The student in the very second to the right with dark t-shirt. Hello? Yes, okay. What's your name?
Dave.
Okay. What's your name again, please?
전효청.
Chang. Okay. Can you read this for us? The Chinese characters? The 5 moral imperatives.
Sorry, I haven't been in China for a long time, so.
You're Chinese or?
Oh, Korean.
Okay, you're Korean. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Is there any Chinese students there? On the right? Yeah, I know. Please, can you read these Chinese characters?
Yeah.
On the very top, 5 moral imperatives.
五伦.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oryun in Korean. Oryun. And then the king and subject. How do you? Yeah, please read that for us.
君臣有义，父子有亲，夫妇有别，长幼有序，朋友有信。
Thank you very much. That's beautiful, actually. Yeah, it's like music.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I begin to really enjoy reading Chinese. These intonations and up and down. It's beautiful language, I think. Yeah. Yeah. 한국 in Korean, 군신 유의, 부자 유친, 부부 유별, 장유 유서, 붕어 유신. 붕어 유신. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so we share this Chinese character. I mean, as all of you know, that Chinese culture have affected Korean culture very much, especially during Joseon Dynasty, and this Neo-Confucianism actually flourished even more than in China, in Korea, during Joseon Dynasty. And this has become very important part of organizing Korean society during the Joseon Dynasty. And it still exert influence in Korean society. So this, the king and the subject, the father and son and man and wife, husband and wife, the senior or older and the younger and the friends, this kind of like official learning have affected everyday lives of Koreans during Joseon Dynasty, and even maybe too during the colonial period, and even today, much less so today, but still we can say that there is some legacy of this traditional teaching of Confucianism. Okay. Yes. During the Goryeo Dynasty, which was prior to Joseon, Goryeo Dynasty, Buddhism was very important. But for 500 years of Joseon Dynasty, Confucianism became almost like national religion, very official principle of organizing society. And especially important was this patrilineal principle that is very lineal and male dominant relationship, father to son, son to grandson, right? This kind of hierarchy was important, and the family name, right? The male, the boy will carry on the family name, and you would this filial piety, hyo, respecting one's parents, was very important principle. Among many principles, 5 principles or 3 principles of Joseon Dynasty or New Confucianism, actually maybe at the core of this relationship, the most important was hyo, filial piety, respect your parents, respect your father. Okay, and a country is seen as kind of extension of family. It's like son and father and son and king and the subject. Okay, so that's how. And in one thing that I need to note is the importance of ancestor worship. Okay, this coming Sunday, right? This coming Sunday is Chuseok, or we call it's kind of Korean Thanksgiving, Lunar Thanksgiving Day, a very important holiday in Korea, and important part of this many rituals during Chuseok or Korean Thanksgiving is ancestor worship. You would visit the graveyards of your ancestors, and you have this ritual ceremony at home in the morning, thanking your grandfather, great grandfather, and your father, who, if they were, has passed away. So this ancestor worship, sharing food and drink, is actually is taking place in memory of the passed away, and also it is very important part of developing family identity. So your family is extended horizontally. That is, your uncle, your cousin, nephew is also part of your family. It's not just the couple and children. It's much more extended family in ancestor worship. And also vertically, it's very important to have your father, your grandfather, your grandparents, and so on. Even though they passed away 20, 30 years ago, which at least during these important days, such as Chuseok or Lunar Thanksgiving or New Year's Day, we will call or invite these deceased ancestors, and we try to memorize them and I think the very important part of it is trying to make the living family feel like they are really part of family. It's a very important identity-making process, this whole ritual of ancestor worship. Okay, that's, we share food through this extended family ancestor worship, and we try to think that it's actually we're sharing the food not only among the living but also with the deceased these ancestors. And this actually is very important part of Korean culture, or this has been a very important part of Korean culture, and in building kind of hierarchical, very collective, family-oriented society. And another important cultural resource for ourselves, for Koreans, it has been shamanism, even though it's less emphasized. Even during Joseon Dynasty, even though officially, Confucianism was this national religion or national value that was emphasized by the learned class, still in everyday lives, shamanism, many historians argue the shamanism was still important in everyday lives of many Koreans, and that maybe have continued even today. And in the shamanism, there is this certain characteristics of shamanism. One is this worldly orientation. I guess, especially compared to Christianity, shamanism really emphasizes this world. Like they would say, they don't really know what would happen if we die. But let's like enjoy. Let's have like affluent life here, now. And so this like the deceased or the ghost or spirit or whatever is important as far as they affect every days of today of the living. So we still have certain rituals that is based on shamanism, and this is very this worldly. We have a particular ritual called Kuocw. It's kind of exorcising evil spirit. If somebody is ill, they would have this ritual. Shaman would come and have dance and music and like have songs and so on, and then evil spirit will be expelled, so the person will become healthy. Or gosa called, which a shamanistic service for the good luck, pujok, talisman. So this is kind of photo of a shaman, and she would like dance and sing and have like certain religious ritual, trying to maybe try to exorcise certain bad spirit from a family or from a person and so on. And still maybe less visible, but many people actually believe in the shaman. This is what you call gosa. So if you have certain maybe new project, you would have this kind of rituals, this kind of service, hoping that this will bring good luck to maybe new business, new movie, or so. And this is kind of typical. We have this pig's head, and then you put the money here, like 10,000 won on the note. It's not very humane, but it's a way of treating the dead pig. But and then this will be shared as very important food after the service. And so even in modern times, this is part of gosa, this ritual, right before launching a new movie project, which is in the kind of entertainment business, very modern, even postmodern business, but they still have this hoping that this movie making is a success, and this movie would become a big success to bring a lot of money. So I don't know, maybe as when they launched Psy, the Gangnam Style, maybe they may have had this Gosa. Maybe it's a good question to ask to Psy. This SM인가? What's the company? The YG. Yeah. Okay, so this kind of very shamanistic ritual does take place today, even today, in modern society, modern Korea. And this traditional shaman talisman kind of changes its form and still shared by young generation. So maybe you can download this talisman. One on the left is like one-sided love, right? If you want to have good relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend or somebody that you like, maybe you could use this one here, right? And on the right, it's for health. So it's traditional shaman belief takes kind of modern form. It's maybe it's not 100% serious nowadays, but still people play with this kind of ideas. Another important characteristic of shamanism is belief in fate and divination. So, for example, we said 인연, 복, 팔자. Okay, this kind of words are used, and so we, even though there's no really rational scientific explanation, they have certain belief system, and they, for example, they say that lucky day, the propitious day, and for example, it will be interesting what will happen to those who were born in on October 27, 1991. Now, the people who were born on this particular day is 21 years old, right? So, is there anyone who was born in 1991 here in this classroom? Okay. Is there anyone who was born in October 27? Too bad. Okay. Yeah. Because this is this is a very lucky day. So on that particular day, there were many weddings, many movings. Actually, many babies were born on this particular day because of modern medical technology. I mean, it's like it's not natural birth. They will say, well, maybe the baby is due in a couple of weeks, and the parent will decide to have cesarean. All right, and they say, well, let's have the baby on this particular day, October 27, so the baby would have good luck, good fortune. So it will be interesting that after maybe 10, 20 years, the people who were born on this particular day would be very rich, successful, and healthy. Maybe let's try trace them and find out whether this kind of belief in fate does work in modern society. But maybe people would not be 100% serious, but they would like to believe that maybe they have their baby on this particular day, the baby would be very happy and fluent and healthy and so on. And so actually in making decisions, in decision-making process, people do consider this kind of shamanistic views, explanations. 궁합. I think this still is important for many couples who are to get married. Okay, let's say that there was a couple, male and female, and they would have their 궁합, their affinity evaluated. That is, they give their date of year, month, day, and time of birth will be matched, and they can find out whether they would have good relationship. Okay, so and they say if they don't have good result, maybe they would kind of reconsider whether this is a good choice or not. So still, this may not be very scientific, but still, people would like to have this kind of premarital assessment of their relationship based on this kind of shamanistic philosophy. Do they have this in China? Not sure, because you haven't really married yet. Okay. Physiognomy, right? It's like your facial appearance is also considered very important. So, for example, they say that a person's fortune can be read via the facial type. So, for example, Lee Byung-chul, who is the father of Lee Gun-hee, who is the CEO of Samsung. Lee Byung-chul was the founder of this big chaebol company called Samsung. He's a very well-known businessman, of course, a very successful businessman. And he was always on the site when they have employee interview. And Lee Byung-chul, the former CEO of Samsung, would consider physiognomy. He would look at the face of the new candidate for important positions, and he would very seriously consider the facial type of the candidates. So he said, well, whether this person could be a successful one, whether he or she could be very loyal to the company, and he could read the facial type, and maybe that's why Samsung has been so successful. I don't know. And according to this physiognomy, there's like prosperous looking. You have to have white complexion. Maybe the Westerners have great advantage here. Or a long nose, double chin, okay, and a round plum nose. Unfavorable looking, dark complexion and crooked nose, sharp chin. Maybe today, sharp chin. I think the young idol groups, they had this chin surgery and make their chin very sharp, but that's not very prosperous looking according to this traditional physiognomy theory. Okay, but anyway, this sounds silly. Or at least unscientific, but still, this does takes place among many people. Some people do take this seriously. Maybe some people do not really take it seriously, but at least they would kind of respect certain this kind of shamanistic rituals, if you will. Geomancy, we call it 풍수지리. I think probably China also has a geomancy. Many Koreans believe that the site and directions of house and ancestor graves in relation to the storage and flow of the earth's energy exert an influence on the fortune and misfortune of the family. So, for example, if your father or if your parents or grandparents die, they would look for very good location for the graveyards, the tomb, and they think that it's important for the future fortune of the next generation or the descendants. And also, they say that city of Seoul, the location is a very excellent place in terms of this theory of geomancy. So it's, I think there's some scientific aspect to this geomancy, like facing the south and having mountains in the back and the river in the front. That's a very, there are a lot of scientists interpret today this is kind of very important for farming or having no flood and so on. In China, I don't know. You need to have geometry, right? Yeah, that's good place. Yeah. For the graveyard, right? You have to have a good location for your tomb of your parents, right? You said expensive. To buy good location. Yeah, for house. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Let me just quickly conclude this part. Yes, I have presented some very simplified description of what Korean culture is. But I think culture does change over time, and I must emphasize that Korean culture over the past 30, 40 years have radically changed and transformed, and this individualism, materialism, egalitarianism, rationalization have become part of ourselves. So not any, I mean, yes, to some extent we have this legacy of reason, legacy of irrationality, we have hierarchy and so on, but we have incorporated different cultural values, especially through the encounter with Western culture and this process of modernization. So it is safe to say that we have this tradition and modern elements together. And different elements are all part of Korean culture today. So when we say what Korean culture is, I must emphasize again that we should look into ourselves today. And I think that's very important to remember, and that's what I expect from your research to exhibit. That is like the way you think, the way you observe today, what is the Korean culture? Okay, let's take a 7-minute break. 7-minute break. Now it's 6:10, 5:10 in China, and let's come back at 5:17. Okay. See you. My question to the students in China, is there anyone who has seen Psy, the Gangnam Style? Please raise your hand, those who have seen. Just one? So all of them, okay. So what do you think? Did you like it? Do you like it? Yeah.
Yes.
Who said yes? Okay. Why do you like it?
Because it's so funny. Because it is so funny.
Okay. And yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's a very well.
Okay.
Thank you. That's well summarized. Actually, we had our own discussion last week after this regular 2-hour lecture, and the students here at Korean University, we also thought that the main reason that it was so popular is because it was funny, and the rhythm is really fun, and like the video, music video is very catchy and so on. So I guess there's kind of universality in this item, which actually attracts people in the world. Very quick, I mean, you are, I hope you have read the chapter in the book on Hallyu. please refer to the syllabus and read the chapter on Hallyu. The book is available. I think the teaching assistant has a copy. I have given a copy to the teaching assistant. So please make arrangement that you maybe borrow or photocopy the chapters from the textbooks, and please read the chapter on Hallyu. This is kind of summary of the chapter that was written by a Korean expert. I'm not an expert on Hallyu, and it's really puzzling to me why some Korean popular culture is quite popular among in some certain part of Korea, in some part of the world. And according to this textbook, the Korean music, Korean drama, Korean movies have become popular in some Asian countries, from Southeast Asia to China to Japan. And why? According to the author of the book, she said that there were some environmental changes. That is, there was like the global media industry began to really expand globally, and especially in these Asian countries where there was blossoming of different channels and cables and satellite, they need some new content. And another factor is that some Asian countries, for historical, political reasons, they do not really wanted Japanese dramas or music, or they did not wanted Western culture. They wanted something Asia. Okay. And also, of course, this booming economies meant that growing middle class, especially middle class young population, wanted some new contents. Okay, and then what happened domestically in Korea was that Korean domestic market became saturated. So they wanted to have new market, which was actually available in many Asian countries. And also we had this very sophisticated, well-developed management companies. And so these companies, this kind of internal factor, domestic factor in Korea, and previously mentioned this international conditions dovetailed, and they really led to this popularity of Korean popular culture. That's her explanation. And also, she adds that we have to differentiate who are the fans and what is popular in different markets. And this, I think this article was written in the mid-2000, and she says that in China and Taiwan, Korean drama fans are broad from teenagers to people in the 70s, but the core fans are women in their 20s and 30s. Korean pop fans are mostly teenagers and people in the early 20s. In Japan, the drama was very popular, and they were middle-aged women. Okay, so there is like different market, different fans, and different industries. After reading this chapter, I felt it's not really enough. I mean, it's because so. First of all, I would like to ask this question. That is, what about in other part of the world? According to this article that we have read, or we're supposed to read, it was kind of Asian phenomenon, and this Asian fans, Asian audience did not want it Western culture or Japanese the popular culture, and that kind of like provided opportunity for Korean popular culture industry. That's an interesting explanation, but in recent years, Korean popular culture, music industry, and so on are becoming more global, I think. Or am I mistaken, or what do you think? I mean, I would like to hear from people from non-Asian part of the world, because this article focused on Asian market. So maybe it's outdated, or is it limited? Yes.
I think the wave didn't really come to Europe concerning K-pop and drama, and I don't exactly know why they haven't really introduced anything, and I don't really know if there was an attempt to introduce K-pop or Korean dramas, but I've never seen like a Korean drama on German television, so maybe they just stick to German, European, American stuff because they know people definitely like it, and there's no real reason to show Korean drama. Then on the other hand, I would say, why not? They could just try, but I think they're not even like really thinking of it maybe. But then Korean movies are quite popular. I don't know how about other countries in Europe, but I've seen I'm a Cyborg, but that's okay. And yeah, and the other one was called Old Boy, something like that. Yeah, and Miss Vengeance was the other one, Mrs. Vengeance, something like that. It's the American title. So, and the critics said that these films are like really good examples. So I think it's all from one like movie producer, or director. So he's become quite popular. But I don't know if you would go to any big movie theater, like mainstream movie theater, they wouldn't show them. But like smaller ones might show them. And yeah, I think it's all about Korean movies in Europe. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a mainstream thing now, but quite some people know Korean movies, and they do appreciate them.
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I'm guessing it's very similar to Germany. I've been abroad for the last year and a half, so I've kind of been out of touch with UK culture. But I spent a year in India, and I realised when I came back from that, a lot of Bollywood films are starting to come through into the UK market. So I think there's definitely a shift, and I think, as Thilo said, probably in smaller cinemas, you're much more likely to see Korean films or different types of films, but in the big ones, as far as I know, it's still the kind of big Bollywood. I've seen advertisements for these films mentioned.
Well, as I'm a Korean studies student, there's a huge interest in Korean culture. So I do know, I do have a different perspective about it. And what I know is that the Korean K-pop parties are getting bigger. So there is an organization called K-pop Hallyu, something like that, and they are organizing events, and I know that it's getting bigger in Austria, but I think it's just a small group of insiders and not whole phenomenon.
Limited, right, in terms of the extent to which the Korean Hallyu, Korean culture is being enjoyed. So in Europe, it's not as big as in Asia, right? So let me ask to some Korean students who really want to, who are eager to actually contribute to the. Is anyone who want to comment on this phenomenon of Hallyu? Were you able to talk to some friends in other part of the world about Korean? No. Okay. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting phenomenon that many, for example, in terms of Korean image of Korea, as we mentioned earlier, like most Westerners might just think of Korean War when they talk of a Korean society. But in recent years, over the past maybe 15 years, the image of Korea has become quite different, and a part of it has something to do with this success of the big businesses such as Samsung and Hyundai and so on the one hand, but also this Korean popular culture, including movie, music, and dramas and so on. And I think it's, at least in many Asian countries, such as Taiwan, Japan, and China, and Philippines, Thailand, and so on. These countries, they do seem to enjoy a lot of Korean popular culture, and I think it's really an interesting phenomenon because, I mean, I guess, how much do you agree with the explanation that was provided by the article that you have read? That is, like, as I described earlier, there was this kind of international context where globally, the media industry, global popular industry itself was expanding, and especially in many emerging economies of Asia. And also they, some say for historical reasons, did not want it like another form of Hollywood or another form of Japanese culture. They wanted something other than Japanese or US culture, and that kind of vacuum was filled by Korean commercialized popular culture. And domestically, Korean culture, the popular culture industry began to really grow and blossom, and domestic market saturated. They look for other markets, and they were able to actually capture this expanding Asian market. Does that make sense to you? The explanation that was provided by the author? Okay, maybe some of you might want to reread the chapter, and please come back with your thought to that, the question. To the students who are in China. Hello? Okay. Hello? Hi, Fudan. Do you have heard about Hallyu? Have you?
Yep.
Okay, and also, what kind of Korean popular culture have you been exposed to? Music? K-pop? Do you have a microphone? Yeah.
Music and film. In fact, I once had great interest in a Korean group named 동방신기.
Okay.
Uh,
동방신기.
yeah,
Yes.
that. Oh yeah. And I even went to see their concert in Shanghai.
Okay.
Um,
Are they coming to Shanghai?
yeah, of course.
When? When do they come?
Uh,
Will they come?
I think it 2008.
They were there, right? So why do you like 동방신기?
I don't know, just all my friends are talking about them, and I have to get to know about them so that I can have the same topic with my friend, and gradually I would just like them for no reason.
Okay, so most of the fans of this Korean pop group, including 동방신기, are teenagers? Would you say?
Yeah.
And also maybe middle class?
Middle class. Yeah. Many ajuma. Yeah, is that right? The middle-aged women.
No. The middle class is like in terms of income, in terms of income or wealth.
I don't really know clearly about it, but I think so. You have to have enough financial support to chase the star.
Right. Yeah. Chase a star. Yes. Well put. Yes. And also, so you buy the CD or right?
Yeah, but not all of them. Too expensive.
Okay, too expensive. Yes. So would you say that there is like emerging affluent, rich, middle class Chinese who are becoming the consumers of these groups, K-pops? Would you agree with this statement? Mostly urban?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for answering my questions. Yeah. Okay. What about the? Okay, let's just move on. Yeah. We have addressed this question the other day, the Gangnam Style, and probably we'll have to see whether this. I mean, this is becoming even bigger than a week ago, but I don't know where it's going. But certainly, it's interesting to see that this particular singer is attracting many fans globally, and actually, it develops into because some people are beginning to get interested in Korean culture, and also they became curious of what Gangnam is, and like there are some articles, and the main medias begin to seriously take this phenomenon, and certainly I think this will be an important contribution to this publicity of Korea, letting people know that there is certain interesting musical culture in Korea. Okay, let's just move on because I think we are behind the schedule. Let's move quickly. As I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of this semester, I'm interested in how Korean society is changing culturally and socially. And one important factor that we need to bear in mind is that there is this process called development, economic change, which is very important. I'm not an economist, but I think this economic change or the process of development have really changed the whole Korean society. And so let's quickly just go over the economic changes. This table shows, it's a description of what has happened over the past 50 years in Korea. Economic growth, 1.2% in 1960. We had this economic boom in the mid-1980s till late 1990s. That's when we had 7%, 8%, 9% increase of economic growth. GDP, $2,000 million too. Really, it has like exploded significantly by 2010. So we have become per capita income $79 in 1960, $79. Now it's more than $20,000. So we have become quite affluent, in terms of industrial structure, we can say that we were largely agricultural society in the 1950s and 60s. Now agriculture and forestry occupies only 2.6% of the whole industry, whereas manufacturing, of course, is important. The service sector is quite important, right? Trade, the scale of trade has become really big, especially look at the number for export. Only $33 million in 1960. Now it's how to read this? $466,000 million. Is that how do you read? Yeah. Billion, right? $466 billion in terms of export. We can say that Korean economy has been and is very export-oriented economy. From the very beginning of industrialization, we'll see we depended on foreign market. Especially important was which country in terms of the market of Korean goods? Yes, to the US. Okay. Now we depend, the largest mass market for Korean goods is China. Yes. China, thank you. Thank you for purchasing Korean goods. Yeah. I think that, that's strengths of Korean economy on the one hand, and also weakness of Korean economy, vulnerability. We depend so much on global market, so if something bad goes on in the global economy, the economy is really suffer, economy. That was true in the 1960s, and it's still quite true even today. Somehow Korea was able to have been quite successful over the past 50 years, and we'll just go over how it happened. It's kind of chronological description of what has happened, because many of you do not really know the economic development process of Korea. Just very quickly, we call it aid economy from 1953. That's when. Why 1953? That's when, what happened? Yeah, Korean War ended in 1953. From that. Yes.
They say at 1953 there was the ceasefire, but actually there was never a treaty signed, a peace treaty. So why do we say end of Korean War? Sorry, maybe it's not, it doesn't fit into, but it's just a basic question.
Okay, let me correct. Ceasefire, not really the end of Korean War, because officially the war has ceased, not really ended, maybe in legal terms, right? Okay, so that's still it's theoretically, officially maybe we are still in the middle of confronting each other. Yeah, okay, but okay, thank you for ceasefire, not really complete end of the war. Okay, so the war ceased in 1953, and then until 1960, the U.S. played a very important role, right? The U.S. Realized through the war that this confrontation between North and South is not just a domestic issue of Korea. It's actually the conflict between the Soviets and maybe the West, the U.S. and Europe. So the U.S. wanted to revitalize capitalist system in Korea, in Taiwan, and Japan, and so on. And so U.S. provided a very large amount of aid to Korea until early 1970s. About $6 billion were provided by the U.S. to revitalize Korean economy. And a very important resource for Korean economy during this period was the PL 480. That's Public Law 480, which provided U.S. surplus agricultural goods. Three white industries, so-called. That's wheat, cotton, and sugar. Wheat, cotton, and sugar. These three goods, three items, were provided by the U.S. through the aid program, and these were probably the only resource for Korean economy. And the Korean government distributed these items to a small number of businessmen. Okay, so some people were able to make money processing wheat flour, okay, cotton, making garments, sugar industry, and among these few very selected business was actually Samsung. 이병철, the former CEO of Samsung, actually was made fortune using this resource and selling, for example, sugar, 제일제당, 백설표, I think it was like, they had this brand. And so this early stage of economic development depended heavily on this imported or the aid provided by the U.S. And that's when a small number of businessmen, such as Lee Byung-chul of Samsung, was able to make some early capital, and which developed into more bigger companies. It was mostly import substitution policy, and from the 1960s, Korean economy became much more export-oriented. 1960s, Korean economy was organized by very strong government, led by whom? Who was the leader of this? Yeah. Yes, Tilo? Yes, Park Chung-hee, yes. Who is the father of one of the important candidate of Korean. So it's interesting, very interesting, yes. Malchung, yeah. Anyway, so from 1960s to early 1970s, we had a very authoritarian bureaucratic regime which really pushed for economic development. So it was based, from the very early stages of this industrialization, it was based on export market. So export of light industrial goods such as textiles, garments, wigs, radio. Wigs, interesting, right? Wigs. It's really wigs. I mean, I vividly remember that this collector will like walk on the street, and he or she would say, "머리 파세요, 머리 파세요." So real hair was purchased by these small processing companies, and they would make natural dark hair wigs and sell to the U.S. market. It was very popular, I heard. It was quite a big business. It was very popular among African Americans in the U.S. Because African Americans have very curly hair, and then they wanted to have very straight, dark Asian hair. They preferred. So some were able to make quite a big amount of money by exporting wigs to the U.S. market. So this early stages of development was very labor intensive. It was based on very cheap labor. External factor, the U.S. market was important, right? And also Vietnam War actually was very important. Vietnam War, many Korean soldiers went to Vietnam, and U.S. provided as wages and other forms of subsidy to Korean economy. It was a very important source of dollar, the foreign currency to Korean economy. They said was quite actually Korean War, they say, was very important for economic revival of Japan. Vietnam War was a very important factor for the revival of the Korean economy in those years when foreign capital was so scarce. Okay, some economists, such as Le Piet, who is a French economist, use the term primitive Taylorism. Taylorism is like it's kind of assembly line, very tedious work, doing the same thing and over again. And they say primitive Taylorism for Asian, Korean economic labor workplace. In the 1960s and early 70s, the main engine of a Korean economy was the female labor. Okay, yeah.
Can you please just explain again why the Vietnam War contributed to the Korean economic growth?
Sure. There are two avenues of earning, because Korean economy really lacked capital, money, and capital was very important for economic engine, and foreign currency was very important, and through this treatment agreement with the Korean and U.S., the thousands, I think more than thousands of soldiers, tens of thousands of Korean soldiers went to Vietnam and fought for actually the U.S. And their most wage was provided by the U.S. And then what happened was a lot of soldiers actually sent their money, wages, to Korea, which became a very important part of Korean capital. Because foreign currency itself was directly transferred to Korea. Okay, that's number one. Another factor was that there was a certain agreement that a lot of infrastructures in Vietnam, for example, when they were building some bridges for the military operation, many Korean companies were actually, because of this Koreans' blood and Korean sacrifice, the U.S. agreed that they would make some contracts with Korean companies. So, for example, actually, Hyundai Construction Company, they were actually quite adventurous and quite bold in building certain military facilities in Vietnam and they, even though they were not, I mean, for Hyundai Construction, which was built by Jung Ju-young, and also later on, Lee Myung-bak, the current president, was actually employee of the Hyundai Construction Company. And in the early stages of their company, Hyundai Construction Company was a very small, tiny company, unknown to the world. But because of this favorite treatment of Korean companies by the US in the war situation, they got very big projects, contracts. They could build some bridges, some military facilities in Vietnam, which directly benefited this Hyundai company. So many Korean companies became quite big after the war. So actually, this for the early stage of growth of some of the Korean construction company have depended a lot to the U.S. through the Vietnam War. Okay, so that's so directly paying for the wage for the many. I think they could be quite astronomically high because there were, I don't know exactly how many went to the war and how many died. Many died, we know, and they died for the peace. They said will and prosperity of the world, but they actually died. Many Koreans become quite critical, just like in the U.S. They became quite critical of the Vietnam War because many young people were dying. Many Koreans become, well, many people went to Vietnam where they have nothing to do with in terms of their political positions, but why? Well, maybe they're earning US dollar, so the blood, they're paying their blood to earn foreign currency. Maybe they are helping Korean economy, okay? So, but, and also some companies were actually, for their growth of the business, they took advantage of this peculiar situation in the Vietnam War. Yeah. Okay, you hear me, right? Okay, let's go back again to this primitive Taylorism. Hello. Your class should be ended now, right? Okay, let me stop here and we'll talk about this primitive Taylorism, which is, I think, is a very important concept in understanding early stages of Korean economic development. Okay, see you. 再见. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, have a nice holidays.